Well, first of all, thanks everyone for joining me to explore this wonderful world of American cloth dolls. I'd actually not seen an American cloth doll before I came to live in Houston in 1997. And I immediately fell in love with them. And the 4 years I was there, I got great pleasure in exploring the various makers and the wonderful creations and learning about them. Now, the time period we're going to look at is 1840s to 1930s. And as I said a minute ago, this is a huge subject for one presentation, so I'm not going to be able to cover all of it. I'll talk about moldy faces and flat face dolls, but I will not cover one of a kind. That's a whole different world and a whole presentation in itself, if not a book. Fortunately, there are some great American cloth doll reference books, so if you do want to find out more, I've got a list at the end that you can have a look at. So sit back and enjoy. So the story of American cloth dolls during this period really reflects the story of America at the time. And what I've got here is a map of where some of the makers you're going to hear about were based. And it reflects where the population lived and moved to, and also the role of women in society and the focus on home crafts. Now, most of the makers you're going to hear about were single doll artists or were part of a small cottage industry. And the vast majority of makers were concentrated in the Northeast, with some, I'll call it outliers elsewhere. Now, although the first maker we're going to talk about was making dolls from the 1840s, the heyday for this type of doll was 1890 to 1930. And then composition dolls took over in terms of popularity. And this fits with the pattern that we see over time, that certain types of dolls come to the fore, are very popular for a while, and then another sort of doll takes over as being the sort of in thing, fashionable thing. Now, the good news is they've had a revival in the last few years and are now being appreciated by many collectors, very appropriately, as works of art by women. And they were all women, interesting, all women, and who at this time had limited ways of making a living outside the home. And they were, in their own way, all pioneers. And the other piece of good news is that there's quite a lot of information available on many of these dolls, not only the markings of the dolls themselves, but also patents, catalogues, and other advertising material. So we may be able to find out quite a bit about both the dolls and their makers. It all started with a lady called Izannah Walker, and she lived and worked in Central Falls, Rhode Island. It's thought she started making dolls as early as the 1840s, but she didn't take a patent out until 1873, and this patent is shown here, and you'll see the date up the top, painted November 4th, 1873. Her dolls ranged from 15 inches to 27 inches in size, and the heads are made of cotton stockinette and paste and pressed into a mould. The features and the hair, and they have very distinctive hairstyles, are painted with oils. The bodies are made of firmly stuffed sateen, and her early and later dolls look similar, but you can, as you will shortly see, spot the difference. This is an example of one of her pre-patent dolls. She's 19 inches, and she's shown here with a trousseau that I built up over time. It is relatively easy to find clothes for these sorts of dolls. Many of them homemade, but it's got a distinctive style that was around for quite some time. So as you can see, these are all bits and pieces that I've picked up. The wooden box shown here is not original. I got it in Holland, actually, of all places, but I think it's very appropriate with this sort of folksy folk art decoration. And it keeps all her treasures safe and sound. These photos show the doll in more detail. The crackling on her face is not unusual. Whatever paint Izannah Walker used has not really withstood the test of time, and a lot of the dolls you'll see have this sort of crackly on it. Some people get it overpainted. I'm okay. I call them well loved, and I left it. It's not right or wrong. It's just taste. She's a very thoughtful look, and I guess she's been around for a long time. So she's one of the dolls I look at and say, if only you could talk and tell your stories. Yes, what stories she could tell. Now here's a close-up of the painting of the hair, and you'll see these wonderful ringlets at the back. This was one of the features of Izannah Walker's dolls, and also those sort of wispy bits at the front. She decorated each doll differently, and the hairstyles are all different in her dolls. That's what I mean by they've got a family resemblance, but they're all different. And she's got these wonderful applied ears that I think are absolutely fabulous. Now, the hands on the Izannah Walker dolls are works of art in themselves. These have actually lasted very well. You can see there's a few scuff marks, but a lot of work went into making these. You imagine trying to sew and turn these, etc. Absolutely fabulous, beautifully sewn, and the thumb is applied separately, and you've got this stitching delineating the fingers. Now, this is a smaller example. She's only 15 inches, but it shows the sateen covered body that I mentioned, and the oil painted shoulder head, lower arms, and lower legs. And some dolls, as shown here, have painted lace up boots. These have been badly scuffed, but you can just see the top of the lace here, and it actually laces all the way down. You've got some dolls that have bare feet, some with boots with different decoration on it. As I say, these have the actual laces. Now, this is what's called a transitional doll. You can tell she's related to the early ones, but she has a different sort of softer look. She's starting to look more like a biscuit type doll, I've often thought. Now, these dolls have been found on various types of bodies, and that's led to the theory that at least some of the heads were sold separately as heads. And then whoever was the carer at home could make the bodies for those dolls. She's very pretty. She's very pretty. Now, this is a post-patent example you'll see a picture of the doll in a minute, but I just wanted to show you the label. She had these labels put on her post-patent, and this is the November date in 1873. It's a label that's stuck on the back of the shoulder plate at the bottom. And it says I.F. Walker's patent November 4th, 1873. And it's actually one of these, what I call dolly miracles, that it survived 150 years, because most of them have not, they've come off. Now, these are the brother and sister. They've got post-patent heads. Now, while they're similar with the other dolls, they've got the sateen body again, the all painted torso, lower arms and lower legs, and the painted ringlets, etc. They have, for my mind, a very different look, and a few details are different. The ears are no longer applied, they're built into the mold, and the lower legs have been painted simulating what I call coloured socks. As you see, the boy's in blue and the girl you can't see, but she's in pink. I'm not exactly sure those are original though. The boots are, but I'm not sure about the painted socks, because I've not seen other examples that would tell me that. So here are the sort of pre-patent, close-up of the pre-patent, the transitional and the post-patent heads, showing how the look changed over time from about 1840 to the 1870s and beyond. So I thought that was useful to see. You see the family resemblance, and they are similar in many ways, but also they're different. So as I say, she was really the first one, and then there was a whole new generation came along. And the first one here is a very interesting cloth doll made by Martha L. Wellington of Brookline, Massachusetts. And again, her patent, you can see her patent here, M.L. Wellington. This is September 25th, 1883. And this is the, again, the sticker that's attached to the bodies of her dolls. Now, the patent document tells us that the head was built around a metal wire construct running both from the back to the front and also side to side. And as I say, on the right here is the actual patent mark. These are a couple of examples of the dolls. They're all 22 to 24 inches, very sort of standard size. They're all stockinette with oil painted heads and lower limbs. And they have needle sculpted features and painted eyes and painted hair. They also have very distinctive buttocks. Am I allowed to say that, Karen, on public? Buttocks, yes. And got very padded, rounded cheeks, which are very endearing. They're like a little baby's bottom sort of thing. They're very, very cute. And again, they all have a family resemblance, but each has their own unique look and character. You can see the little girl on the left is very girly looking, you know, little sugar and spice and everything nice, whereas the little boy is very mischievous looking. They've got very, very distinctive looks. Now, this lady you may have heard of, Martha Janks Chase, a fascinating lady. She ran a cottage industry out of the doll house in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Remember Rhode Island again? Stamped with the Chase stockinette doll. You can see this was her stamp that she had. And that stamp was either in the left leg or under the left arm, or some of them had a paper label. Now, the dolls have heads and limbs of stockinette, again, treated and painted with oils, large painted eyes with thick upper lashes, and rough stroked hair to provide texture. And the hair is very distinctive, very thick. Her early dolls have cloth bodies jointed at the shoulders, hips, elbows, and knees, but later ones are only jointed at the shoulders and hips, and some have bodies that are completely painted. So it's relatively easy to identify the earlier dolls from the later ones because of the bodies. She made a mix of clay dolls from 8 inches, and this little one here is only 8 inches, but you can find them as big as 40 inches. And she also made hospital dolls, which were used to train nurses. They were 19 inches to 64 inches, so real life-size dolls, inverted commas. But she also made character dolls, like a set of Alice in Wonderland dolls, Charles Dickens characters, and sometimes they're rarer, but they do come up for auction. Now, she started in 1889, and believe it or not, the Chase family continued to make dolls until 1981. It's over 100 years. So that firm lasted over 100 years. Now, a beautiful stuffed stockinette doll was designed by a lady called Julia Jones Beecher of Elmira, New York. Now, she made dolls in 1893 to 1910 as a fundraiser for the Park Congregational Church. And quite a few of these dolls are related to churches and fundraising. It's very interesting. Now, her dolls are 16 inches to 23 inches. This is one of the smaller examples. They have distinctive looped wool hair with the painted eyes and mouth and got needle sculpted faces. So they're not painted at all in terms of the skin. They're not marked, but they're quite unique and quite easy to recognize. Now, you can see on the side here, they came with a photo and a letter from Julia to New Mama, which I'll show you in a minute. But this is one of her sort of advertising cards. And this is what I mean by there's quite a lot of information out there, because there are cards and catalogues and various things out there, because by this time, doll makers were advertising their wares. And you can see this is, I laugh when I say 50 cents off when material old silk jersey underwear is sent. So there's nothing new under the sun. Recycling. You could send your old underwear and you'd get a doll back. Or maybe, I'm not sure I'd like to send my old underwear to get a doll made. Anyway, this gives us a lot of information. And here is a photo of Julia and one of her dolls. And this was sent to the new mama, as you can see. My dear mama, if you'll always take me up by the waist and never by the arms, if you'll give your hands a little washing before you play with me, if you will not leave me out in the dust or hot sunshine, and if you'll not squeeze my face and nose flat, I'll be your pretty baby a long time. I send you a picture of my old mama. So this would come. I got this on eBay actually. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It was a treasure. It's a find. Now here's a black doll that's sometimes referred to as a Beecher type, but I'm told by people who know far more about the subject than I do, particularly Nancy Smith. I remember the first time with Nancy Smith, I said, I'm told this is a Beecher type. She went, no, Carol, this is not a Beecher type. So it's one of these dolls that causes controversy. But it's still called Beecher type in many reference books, etc. So it's another, we know very little about them. They're beautiful dolls. This is wonderful condition. Sometimes the stockinette has gone and sometimes the hair is gone. But this one is in wonderful condition. They've got, I don't know whether it's a form of early celluloid, but the bead eyes are, maybe someone can tell me what they think they're made of. But the stitching of this is absolutely fabulous. Now, Ella Smith Doll Company of Roanoke, Alabama, made dolls between 1889 and 1925, and they were marked in various ways, including Patent November. I think this is upside down, but this one is Patent November 1912, number 2, Ella Smith Doll Company. But this one's upside down. She made dolls from, again, I'm told 8 inches to 36 inches, though I've never seen one advertised. I think the smallest one I've seen is at 11 or 12 inches. So I don't know about the 8 inches, but certainly she made dolls as small as 11 or 12 inches. And the early versions are all cloth and painted with oils. And they've got this sort of tab jointing at the shoulders and the hips because they sit very flat. Got a flat derriere for sitting, painted hair with circular seam on head, and the molded face with painted facial features. And again, the applied ears, painted stockings and shoes. You get different colored boots. This is the blue version. You get orange, you get red, you get yellow, you get all different sorts of colors. Now, there are quite a few variations. Some have bare feet and some are wigged. And later dolls have a sort of moldy ears and bobbed style hairstyle. And It's a different sewing. It's a different structure of the head. And whilst Ella's later life was very sad, and there has been a very good book written about her and her dolls, she did leave the doll world with a superb legacy. Yeah, she had some business issues, and her business had to close, but she was a wonderful maker. Now, a lovely cloth doll was distributed by J.B. Shepherd and Company from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from about 1900 to 1920. Now, they're not marked, and the maker of the doll is unfortunately not known. They're either 18 or 22 inches, and they're all cloth, and they've got painted shoulder-type heads, again, lower arms and legs, and they've got this painted hair and well-molded facial features and ears. But she only made sort of a couple of molds, so again, they're very distinctive and very recognizable. Most of the dolls are the larger size, like it's my right-hand side here, and have a certain look about them. The smaller size is less common and also has this less common face. Now, this note on the right-hand side was recently refound that shows that the rare dolls made by Dorothy Kinghorn Wilson were actually made by Dorothy Kinghorn Wilson. The story here is Nancy Smith had this note and had stored it somewhere for safekeeping when she got the information, but then couldn't find it, and she couldn't find it for years. So she remembered it as being Dorothy Kinghorn Wilson. So you might find in articles and books that it says Dorothy Kinghorn. Then she found a bit of paper and it said Dorothy Kinghorn Wilson. So again, patented. We made about 1910. But you know, not a lot is known about this. They're very rare, and it's, as they thought they were made about 1910, but only to order, and hence the rarity. Now, Gertrude Rollinson designed dolls that were made by the Utley Doll Company in Holyoke, Massachusetts, and they were made from 1916 to 1929. And they're marked with a stamp in the shape of a diamond. You can see this on the right-hand side here. It's got a doll in the center and Rollinson doll mass around the border. Now they're 12 to 26 inches. And again, they've got moldy painted cloth and limbs, painted hair or human wig, painted features, and sometimes with teeth. Now, they often get confused with Martha Chase dolls. And you'll see that in auctions, people attribute these dolls to Martha Chase. Well, there's three main differences. The Rollinson dolls have extremely long top eyelashes. If you look at this little one here, this little one's only sort of 12 or 13 inches, but she's got huge, sort of, she's got a lot of mascara on. That's what it looks like. Now also they've got different colored painted finger and toenails, and they have a round metal grommet at the back, just under the shoulder head. So if the painting's not telling you that, have a look if you find one of these dolls at the back shoulder head and just feel at the bottom, and there's a round metal grommet at the back. And it's a good example of you know, us having to be a bit detective-like when we're looking at dolls, because they do look very similar to the Martha Chase. Now, some of you may recognize these dolls. They're Kampes dolls, 18 to 20 inches, and they were made by Louise R. Kampes in her studio in Atlantic City, New Jersey, from 1919 to the early 1930s. Patented in November 1920, they had various markings over the years, sometimes stamped in black on the back or the foot or the back of the head. You can just see here, this is an example, Kampes Atlantic City. Sometimes it was Kampkins, a dolly made to love, patented by L.R. Kampes Atlantic City, New Jersey. And sometimes they had a red paper heart on the left side of their chest. Now, they had moldy mask faces with painted features and were wigged, apart from the early baby version, and had cloth body and limbs. Now, one thing Louise Kampes did, which was new, was she made a real feature of the clothes. And the designs are very distinctive, and many items have a contrasting colour of stitching. So this stitching here, along the top of the top of this sort of hem here, and round the sleeves and round the neck, is a very distinctive feature. And people would come back to buy just the clothes for their dolls. So it was a very popular way of building a trousseau, if you like. And she produced new outfits every season, which proved very popular and brought her return customers. Now, you often find Kampkins with extra clothing, and also trunks were sold. So I have seen Kampkins dolls with trunks and full trousseaus up for sale. They're absolutely fabulous. Now, four sisters, Mary, Elizabeth, Marion, and Ruth Tibbits, lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and are known to have made at least 3 different types of cloth dolls. The first was reminiscent of the traditional handkerchief doll, and with clothes effectively being the body. This is this one here. They patented this in 1923. And the second type are all 6-inch cloth dolls with printed needle sculpted faces and romper style pastel colour bodies. I think they've got these switched round. I think this is the handkerchief one. Is it? I'm not sure. Now, the third type of doll, most of these dolls have managed to retain their cloth tag, which identifies the Mrs. Tibbits as the maker. As they were patented. This is the one I know more about. This is the third type of doll, and it's known as baby sister, and it's shown here. Now, this is a much larger doll, and it's a contoured head covered in stockinette, so it's a bit like the sort of the Beecher type doll, with long needle stitches added around the nose, eyes and mouth, and oil-painted features. Now, they've got really chubby bodies that are well shaped with curved limbs and fingers separated by stitching, and they're well marked both on the doll and on the baby clothes. So this is an example of the marking. Trade baby sister mark. So this is on the body, again patented. And this was attached to the example I have. Doll handmade by the Tibbits sisters, gift to G. Ann Pennington, 1921. At that time sold in, I think it's Harris for $25. Jersey that covers the doll was made in France. Good heavens. So this wasn't somebody's underwear. This was, made in France and imported. Now, I particularly like the larger doll with it's very expressive. And I thought this was the only size of baby sister that was made. But recently I found these 2 smaller versions, and they really are tiny. They're like 8 inches, 9 inches. And I know someone else who has one, and we've been talking about it, and we think these are smaller baby sisters, so dolls for a doll type of thing, because they're so similar to the, in construction, to the baby. They're not marked, unfortunately, but we do think these are miniature baby sisters. Now, Madame Alexander of the Alexander Doll Company, New York, made cloth dolls from 1923 onwards. Although before that, the Alexander sisters were designing doll clothes and dressing dolls commercially. The dolls themselves are marked in various ways, usually Alexander. Clothing has a white cloth label with blue lettering sewn into a seam which says Madame Alexander, and usually the name of the specific doll. Cloth and other early dolls are sometimes unmarked and identifiable only by the clothing label. Now, cloth character dolls were produced between 1933 and 1940, and at 7 to 24 inches, they're all cloth with a moulded felt or flocked mask face with painted eyes glancing to the side. I particularly like the American tot dolls, and this is a photo of Madame Alexander with a boy and girl version of these dolls, American tot dolls. And these are examples of these dolls. They remind me of the Kampes, and in fact, there is a theory that Madame Alexander acquired the Kampes molds when Louise Kampes closed her business in the early 1930s. It's one of these great things about doll collecting. There's always more to sort of learn and dots to join. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, various artists under the sponsorship of the United States Federal Works Progress Administration, WPA, were employed to design dolls. One of the best known makes is the WPA Milwaukee, Wisconsin doll. It's 22 inches with a molded and painted stockinette head, painted eyes, yarn hair, very distinctive hair, cloth body with the unique jointed legs. The clothing was designed to be educational, made of brightly covered cotton, and it's easy to put on and take off with large buttons that were suitable for young children. Both boys and girls were made, boy and girl dolls were made, with some being dressed in national costumes or characters from children's stories. It was the first time that white and black workers worked alongside each other and were paid the same way. So these dolls are of great historic importance in a number of ways. Both the doll and the clothes are normally marked, and on the right is an example of markings on the doll body, and on the left is an example of marking on the clothes. You can see here, famous lady, designed by Helen Clark. Yeah, she was heavily involved in this. They're very well marked. These are wonderful dolls. Roxana Elizabeth McGee Cole of Conway, Arkansas, made cloth dolls from the late 1860s through to the early 1900s, and she died in 1907. Now, her completely hand-sewn muslin dolls have needle-sculpted chins, dimpled hands, and stitched fingers and elbows. The noses are slightly padded from underneath and have a tiny slither of wood, tiny slither of wood inserted to give them a three-dimensional look. Now, what happens with that piece of wood? Sometimes it works its way through the muslin. So very often these dolls have, the muslin has been broken because of that piece of wood. She used mask faces and drew the features by hand. And the hair is mostly delicately drawn on, although some dolls have some human hair. This one has some human hair on it. The Cole dolls were sold all over the USA and in Europe. I actually found this one in London, believe it or not, at an auction. And she was assisted by her daughter-in-law, Molly Hunt Cole, who carried on the business into the 1930s. And some of you have may seen her dolls. They're similar, but a bit different to the original Roxana Cole dolls. Quite a few cloth dolls are made by groups of women to raise funds for various good causes. And an example of this is the Ladies Sewing Society of Central Moravian Church, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. From 1872 onwards, they made 16-inch to 18-inch Polly Helmbecker dolls. I'm sure I've pronounced that appallingly. Polly was the daughter of the Moravian missionary John Heckewelder. That's better. They're all cloth with a flat face, so we're now on to flat faces, hand-painted hair and features, stitch joint limbs, mitten hands, with stitch fingers and separate thumbs. Regardless of when they were made, they have 1870 style clothing. After 1915, they always have a blue or pink checked cotton dress with a lace-trimmed white apron, lace edging, and a crocheted outer bonnet with a bow the same colour as the dress, black shoes, and white stockings. They're not marked. From the 1930s onwards, they also made these smaller ones here. By the way, this is a pre-1915 because I do believe this is her original clothing. This is how she came to me. So I think she is an old one, pre-1915. On the right-hand side here is one of these smaller ones made from the 1930s onwards, 4 to 5 inches, and they're called Benigna dolls. They're all cloth with painted features depicting Moravian females with different coloured caps designating their position in society. And you find them with different coloured caps, and also the stitching is different. And each doll carries a drawstring bag, and it's got a paper identifying her. And handwritten on here is, about, it says, if it's blue, it's a married sister. If it's pink, it's a single sister. If it's white, it's a widow. And if it's cherry, it's little girl. So the stitching on the doll, because they're all dressed very similarly, but the stitching is different, depicts the sort of status, if I can say that, of the doll. Now, yet another doll is Maggie Bessie, made from the 1890s to the early 1940s in Salem, North Carolina, USA. Only about 500 dolls were reportedly made, and these all cloth girls and boys were handmade from patterns created by the Fole sisters. That's P-F-H-O-L. The dolls have flat faces with oil-painted facial features and hair, and they come in various sizes from 13 inches to 22 inches. The girl dolls have center parted painted hair like the one here, you can see here, and are dressed in a simple style of dress, blue or pink, with a bonnet and a painted oilcloth shoes. And you can see the doll here. This is you can see more of the dress here. The boy dolls have side parted hair and are found in far fewer numbers than the girls. They came dressed in a shirt, shorts, cap, and painted oilcloth shoes. These Maggie Bessie dolls were made by sisters Maggie, or Margaret Gertrude Fole, 1877 to 1965, and Bessie, Caroline Elizabeth Fole, from 1870 to 1959, both of whom remain unmarried. The dolls are unmarked, but are very distinctive in style, so they're very easy to recognize. Now, another pair, you see them here, of sisters were Emma and Marietta Adams. They made cloth dolls from 1891 to 1910 and beyond. Their dolls were 15 inches to 29 inches, were all cloth, and again had painted hair and features, hand painted on this flat face and treated limbs. Now, before 1900, they were stamped on the back of the body Colombian doll Emma E. Adams, Oswego Center, New York. But after 1906, the stamp read the Colombian doll manufactured by Marietta Adams, Rutten, Oswego, New York. Emma initially painted all the dolls, but when she died prematurely in 1900, Marietta took over, hence the change. Now, their two styles of painting are very similar, but they've got distinctive differences, so you can tell which is which. The doll here is by Emma, and the doll on here is Marietta. And it was one of their dolls, Miss Columbia, became world famous when she circumnavigated the globe to raise funds for children's charities from 1900 to 1902. And you can still see the doll, I believe, and find out more about her journey at the Wenham Museum in Massachusetts. The next slide shows you more of these dolls. As you can see, it's very similar, but it's very distinct, different painting. The nose has got lines down here. This is Marietta's doll. Emma's dolls do not. It's a different shape of nose. The mouths are similar, but the eyes are different, and the eyebrows are longer and heavier. Both beautiful dolls. And this is how the heads were constructed. The single seam running here. So very, very similar constructions. But the painting is amazing because it looked much more three-dimensional, but you can see here that they were flat faces, but the painting brings it to life. And in fact, these are marked. You can see on the left, the Colombian doll manufactured by Marietta Adams, Rutten. This is on the Marietta doll. And on the doll body, very, very special, writing, Colombian doll made 1990-1910 by Marietta Adams, signed by her daughter, Esther R. Doyle, October 25, 1941. So this was one of the Adams family dolls. So this is very special. But you can see how a lot of these dolls are relatively easy to identify because they have got markings on them of some type, a label or something that has still lasted the test of time. Now, some lovely dolls were made and distributed by E.I. Horseman, New York, from 1893 onwards. And their early dolls have cloth faces with hand-painted features, sometimes with mohair wig, and cloth bodies jointed at the shoulders and hips. Their sizes range from 13 inches to 30 inches and are not marked. Later dolls have lithographed features, but I particularly like this one here, the Black Babyland Rag. I think that's a wonderful doll. This one is huge. This one, if I believe my memory is right, was 30 inches. She's a big girl, big girl. But I think this is very, very sweet face. Wonderful dolls. And here's an example of a Horseman ad for these dolls. It's an extract from a small booklet or catalogue that featured their dolls along with a short poem. And here is the Babyland Dinah. Here is Auntie Dinah, bright and clean and neat, from her yellow turban to her slippered feet. So each of the dolls that was pictured had a little poem written about them. Look at the bottom here. Retails at $2.50. I wish. Do you not wish you had a time capsule? Could go back in time. Oh dear. Now, various companies made what I'll call cut and sew dolls. I think that's what they're called. And Cocheco Manufacturing Company, Rollinson Company, Arnold Print Works, Art Fabric Mills, etc. And various types and sizes of dolls were printed on cloth to be cut and sewn. They were very easy to distribute. So if you imagine, as the country was moving west, you could, send these cut and sew dolls anywhere very easily, and then whoever received them, typically the mother or grandmother, whatever, would cut out the dolls, sew them, stuff them, and make them. So they were very popular. There's a lot of them around. Some are pre-printed with underwear and outer clothing. This one, for example, has got pre-printing, but also you could cut out clothing and make the clothing. And some are marked, although in many cases the mark was on the fabric that was discarded after cutting. So when you got the cut and sew, the thing that would identify the doll was in a bit that you didn't use. So I particularly like these dolls made by Ida Gutzel and made in New York from the 1890s, shown here on the left. Now, I mentioned at the start there was quite a few reference books that contain information on cloth dolls, American cloth dolls, and here they are. Linda Edward, who many of you will know, she did a wonderful book on cloth dolls. The Adams sisters, one of their descendants, Diane Doyle Parrish, actually put together from the family records this wonderful book, The Story of Colombian Dolls, and the Presbyterian doll, Dolls That Built a Church. Rag dolls, this is, I'm not sure when this was published, Estelle Patino. The Doll Collector of America in 2003 did a book on benefit dolls, all these cloth dolls that were made to raise funds. And Dorothy McGonigal, who many of you will know, she did a celebration of American dolls, which has a number of the cloth dolls in it. This is a wonderful little book, the story of the Chase dolls, called The Dollhouse. Marjorie A. Bradshaw, whose mother used to work at the Chase factory, if you could call it that, the thing at the bottom of the garden. And she remembers as a little girl going with her mother to the place where the dolls were made. And it's her memories of it. It's a lovely little book if you can find it. And then here's one, The Alabama Baby Indestructible Doll by Bonnie Gamble Ballinger. So as I say, many of the dolls that I've talked about, you know, they merit a whole book, never mind a whole presentation. So there's lots of information out there, and they're worth the read. So that's it, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It's all too brief look. I said at the beginning, it is a huge subject, and apologies if I've missed out one of your favourite makers. But I would like to close with a thank you and two exciting bits of news. The thank you is to the wonderful Nancy Smith, who she's not well now. She's in a care home, but I was able to visit her about 2 weeks ago when I went over to the States, and I went to see her, and it was absolutely lovely, absolutely lovely. So I thank her because she was the one. It's all her fault. That's why I've always told her. It's all her fault that I got into American cloth dolls because she really was very generous with her teaching and encouragement. However, here's the two bits of news. The first exciting bit of news was we were able to acquire, this is UFDC Museum, the US stamp doll, Izannah Walker stamp doll. If you remember, the stamp dolls came out maybe 29 years ago, 30 years ago, and no, it was 29, I think. And this, they did an Izannah Walker, and we were able to acquire it, and it's now in the UFDC Museum. So for those of you who came to convention and went on a tour to the museum, you would have seen her there. I think we've got a framed photo of all the stamps there and some other things. And so we're very honoured to have that in our museum. But the other bit of news is indeed that talking about stamp dolls and convention, in 2027, it will be the 30th anniversary of the American stamp dolls. And we've already started planning to have a special exhibit of as many of those stamp dolls as we can find at convention. And so if you know where one of these dolls is, let me know, because we're trying to track them down. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you. I'll stop sharing.